Good morning, everyone. Welcome to what's going to be a very exciting webinar between Totaljobs and Firefish, looking at what's been going on in the market in 2026, what can recruiters expect for the year ahead as well, and taking a real deep dive into the data around that. So I'm joined today by very special guests. I've got Dr. Julius Prost from Totaljobs. Julius, would you like to do a wee introduction?
Yeah, hi. So thanks for joining us today. I'm a senior economist working for the Stepstone Group, including for Totaljobs, and I regularly do analysis on the UK labor market and also other advanced economies, talking about current labor market conditions and what's happening in the economy.
And we are also joined by Lawrence from Totaljobs.
Hi, David. Thank you. So I'm the product director. I'm responsible for the application process of Totaljobs and also the way that we integrate with ATSs such as yourself.
Lovely. And on the Firefish side, we have Jamie.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. Hi, Lawrence. Hi, Julius. And hi, everybody watching. My name's Jamie King. I am the head of mid-market sales at Firefish Software.
Lovely. And I'm David. I am the head of partners at Firefish Software. And I think what everyone's been waiting for. Shall we dive in, Julius, and have a look at the data?
Yeah, sure thing. So let's talk about the economic outlook at first. And so we'll do a little bit of a dive into the UK economy and labor market. Do we see the slides? Can we pull up the slide?
Yeah. There we go.
Perfect. So the first thing to keep in mind is that if we go to the next slide, that I went into this year quite optimistically, and then obviously the first thing we encountered is this quite severe oil price shock that started with the war in Iran. And so what we experienced there was just a global surge in energy prices. And obviously with that, this is a significant negative shock for the economy, unfortunately. Instead of growing at a rate of 1.2% this year, the UK economy will probably only grow at a rate of 0.7%. And that is mainly due to higher energy prices, which are squeezing businesses, and it's also squeezing households who face higher cost of living due to that surge in energy prices. I wrote a little bit of a blog about that. You can also see on the right-hand side that obviously the shock is affecting different sectors of the economy quite differently. Transportation and logistics, energies prices are a direct input, so they're affected quite severely. Manufacturing is affected because interest rates are going to be higher. Same for hospitality. There'll be lower consumer spending, so hospitality is suffering a little bit as well. And so you can go further down the ranking. But in general, what you should expect for this year, there's a lot of economic uncertainty, inflation uncertainty, but probably at least half, maybe 1 percentage point higher inflation and slightly lower economic growth. And that means a slower labor market, right? Slower economic growth means companies will recruit less. And if we go to the next slide, we see that labor market conditions have actually deteriorated quite a bit already over the last few years. On the left-hand side, we see the unemployment rate. Unemployment is up by about 1 percentage point from its very low from some 3 years ago. It's kind of like hovering around 5% right now, expected to remain reasonably stable. So at least there's some good news there. But on the right-hand side, the chart shows payroll employment. So the number of people in the UK who have a payroll job, that's like some 30 million people roughly. And we've lost about 170,000 payroll jobs over the last 2 years. And so that is across sectors. That is obviously a very bad sign. That is not recessionary yet. 170,000 in a labor market of 30 million, but it's obviously clearly in the wrong direction. And if we go to the next slide, there's a couple of reasons why that is. The global economy, just low economic growth, a lot of economic uncertainty, but also domestic pressures, right? And so there's two in particular, unfortunately, that have harmed the labor market quite substantially over the last few years. And so the first one is the massive increase in the minimum wage. If you look to the chart on the left, you can see that the minimum wage has gone up significantly over the last few years. It now stands at £12.71. And so comparing that internationally to other countries, that is a significantly high level. It's one of the highest across all OECD economies compared to the median wage. And so that massive wage pressure, the increase of wages at the bottom, has really hurt some employers. It's hurting pubs, it's hurting hospitality, restaurants, chains. It's hurting retail, retailers, supermarkets, Tesco, Aldi, etc. They all face significantly higher employment costs. And on top of the minimum wage, that's the table on the right, you see that the national insurance contribution increase a few years ago led to a significant surge in employment costs as well. So there was a massive tax hike on businesses. If you employed somebody who has a salary of 30,000, 40,000 pounds, the additional tax was an additional 1,000 pounds roughly on a yearly basis, a significant tax hike. So these two factors combined slowed the labor market. And if we go to the next slide, we can very much see that even worse than the that the sectors that are affected the most, we see that it is literally retail and hospitality. If that is the employment change over the last 2.5 years, and you can see only one line going up, that is pretty much healthcare, right? 150,000 jobs still created in the healthcare sector. But retail and hospitality each have lost about 100,000 jobs over the last 2 years or so. And again, the main reason is the surge in employment costs, higher minimum wage, higher taxes have affected these sectors more than other sectors, right? So these are low wage sectors. Employers have low profit margins. They employ a lot of people. And so employment has gone down. But even more so than employment, we see the slowdown in the labor market when we look at vacancies. That would be the next slide. And so if we look at kind of like the number of vacancies in the UK economy, we see that they are very low right now. We had a surge in vacancies right after the pandemic. Some 1.3 million people vacancies open throughout 2020. We're at around here right now. And so from a hiring perspective, it's a very weak labor market. And the chart on the right shows that workers are suffering as a result. The number of job-to-job transitions is actually quite low, has fallen substantially. Workers are struggling to find a new job. They're changing less frequently in the slow labor market. And so that is a big result of the economic and labor market slowdown, that job seekers are struggling. Maybe one piece of good news, though, if we end with the last slide that I have, and that would be on AI. We're seeing that AI is already having an effect on the labor market. It is affecting the skills that employers are asking for quite dramatically. So especially across white collar sectors. And so what this chart is showing is that the number of job postings with AI skills has surged tremendously. And so that is not just prompt engineers, right? So there could be economists with AI skills, marketing, salespeople, analysts, anybody who has AI skills. The number of job postings that mention AI skills has gone through the roof and has literally doubled or tripled across countries over the last couple of years. And so these skills are in really high demand, and job seekers who have that skill are seeing actually a reasonably good labor market. They see that their demand is, their skills are in high demand. And I'll leave it at that for now, I think. Thank you.
So I'm going to take over from Julius and just talk about how we respond to that as a job board. So, being in the acquisition space, I'm lucky to work with people like Julius because I get to understand those trends, try and obviously understand the needs of the recruiter, then try and meet somewhere in the middle. So if you go on a slide, David, what I would take away from what Julius has just said is, employer demand has become softened. Candidate movement is also slower, but applying is becoming significantly easier as well over the top of it. There's also, AI roles and determining whether they are buzz or, and just the need to include that within job descriptions or genuinely if it's kind of creating roles. And what Julius is focused on here is like what is actually creating roles. Then there's the recruiter's challenge. So there's fewer opportunities, there's more applicant noise, there's less room kind of for their wasted effort. And this is where, we can help and Firefish can help. So the starting point for us, though, it would be as much recruiter data and insight as possible. Ultimately, we're here not to drive as many applications as possible but to actually try and deliver hires. And the only way we can do that is work with our partners to make sure that we've got the data to actually understand whether the recruiter is being successful or not. So we have a system called Connect, which is APIs between the apply process and the ATS, and then trying to receive quality data back. And then we kind of use that to try and understand whether we're delivering good return on investment. So if you go to a next slide, the way we sort of do that is through, first of all, Connect Apply. We have a quality score that is driven by recruiter data. So we have our own kind of small ATS function that gives us kind of continual data, but it's never as rich as enterprise data from our partners, and that informs our quality score, which is sort of dynamically changing based on obviously it's like fully trained, so it took us a long time to get there, but it's dynamically assessed regularly. And then we use that score to kind of steer candidates, influence the recommendations that they go for, even dissuade or persuade them at the apply process. And if we do an integration, it means that we actually control the apply process, which means that we can take action there. So we can make the entire form go blue or red if you're not the right fit, or you are the right fit. Try and encourage you or dissuade, and that has a dramatic effect. So we can increase the sort of match talent. So we bucket our the profile match score is perfect, good, and sort of low match. Match talent refers to perfect and good. So we can increase that by 40%, but then for the low matching, we can reduce that by 9%. But we have to be careful in this space. If we're looking at blue collar roles, quality scores can be, equally damaging. If a recruiter is focused on not necessarily experience, but more on skills and location, we need to adapt to that need and be conscious of it. And this is where the sort of the quality comes in. So we can then see what the outcome is at the other end. We can see what the time to hire is per customer, and we can start to inform that process and support it. So we can give more transparency to the candidate. This is one of the major things that they want. The reason why they come to a job board or choose a job board is they want transparency. And that's also why they drive straight to the ATS as well. They want as closer contact to the customer as possible. And then we can give them guidance, like if they don't hear anything, we can say, well, traditionally, you don't hear back from this type of employer or, this sector for this amount of time. And we can look at, differences between sectors in terms of their hiring stance and how quick. And then we can provide that data back to the customer. We can say, well, as a market, actually, you're quite slow or quite fast, and that being good or bad. If you move to the next slide. That's great. That part is great for like steering, but where it actually becomes beneficial to the recruiter more directly is then how we kind of provide that data through. So, for example, our CV to matching, which is what the score is based on. So CV to job matching. sometimes that leaves gaps, that we need to identify, especially when it's blue collar role and, experience is less meaningful. So we'll generate our own gap questions during that apply process. Obviously, it's an AI that's kind of doing this. We'll try and do that in a kind of normalized way so the data is usable for the partner. And then we'll also provide an assessment through to the partner, or we have our own system where they can come in and they can control, the quality of that assessment or factors that they would rather improve or upweight or downweight. So that's just an example of how we take Julius's insights and then try and turn them into a product and try and adapt it for the recruiter need with help of partners. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Lawrence and Julius. That was really interesting. I think, Jamie, I'd be really interested in hearing from your perspective, because you're out talking to recruiters day in, day out. In the data, there is some really interesting data points around there. I think, what I would like to ask you about is, the exposure for recruitment firms is, I've always found, particularly, when you've got rising costs of employment, it kind of hurts them on two sides. So not only is it more expensive for them to grow their business, and when, a lot of recruitment businesses traditionally, if you want more money, add more recruiters. But then also your clients are going to be facing challenges as well. It's going to be softer demand for, growing their own team, and they'll probably be asking for a discount in your recruitment fee as well to cover that NI increase. So what kind of conversations around that are you having at the moment?
Yeah, so it's what can recruitment leaders do to respond to it, right? And the first thing is, I think recruitment leaders, recruiters, generally service providers, I think we all have to accept that there are things we simply cannot control. And Julius's point earlier on, it's the local and global economic climate brought about by political and situations and warfare. That's entirely out of our control. There's nothing agency leaders can do other than try to adapt to the circumstances that those things produce. And that's where I've seen some of the best agencies. They're doubling down on the things that they can control. The first is productivity. Every recruiter simply needs to spend more time in their day doing the activities that generate revenue, whether that's speaking to more candidates, developing client relationships, winning new business, or be that harder in a market where the job count is lower. Anything that's repetitive or administrative should be simplified and automated. And that, again, will tie in quite nicely with what Julius said about the adoption of AI and AI skills showing up in jobs. You can also see that in the data from some of the big boys in the recruitment industry, right? You take a look at some of the largest companies in our market globally. All of them are reporting reduced revenues and reduced EBITDA compared to 2 or 3 years ago, certainly 3 years ago. However, all of their figures on revenue or profit per head have stayed fairly strong, or even in some cases improved. So that focus on productivity is key. The second thing is we're focusing now on getting more value from the assets we have. So most agencies invested heavily when the sun was shining and we were trying to make hay. Candidate databases grew, client relationships may or may not have grown. They probably became a bit transactional during a time where you could throw a stone out the window and hit a new job to work on. Focusing on what we have and capitalizing on how can we turn our data into revenue opportunities faster by benefiting from the integrations and the data insights that the likes of Lawrence has produced there. Having a strict ICP, getting really granular, having a repeat system for business development that is focused on where you are getting the most value and reducing some of those discussions where we're having to discount our fees. but then also having inside your CRM system a ready to deploy engaged talent network that you may have attracted through job boards and developed relationships with and maintained their engagement and kept their data up to date. But as the market shifted towards more contract and temp opportunities, speed to market with a deployable candidate database has become essential. You don't have the luxury anymore of treating a contract role the way you treated a perm role, and trying to use your perm system to do contract stuff, because you don't have the luxury of the time, especially when jobs are so competitive, right? There's another recruiter just waiting around the corner to take that client by acting quicker.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. And I think one thing, I really liked about what you were talking about there, Lawrence, was, making sure that you've got good quality candidates coming into the database and you've got a good quality flow of data in for recruiters to work. So that is, certainly conversations I've had. One of the concerns is, okay, if we go and advertise our roles out, it's easier now than ever for someone to go and apply. I'm going to wind up with a database full of people that aren't really a very good fit, and that's going to create a lot of noise. It's very difficult to get through. So, it's a good way of, helping reduce that noise. I think you've raised a really interesting point as well there, Lawrence, that maybe it'd be good to get Julius to weigh in on. Are you seeing the increase in national insurance contributions, the increase in the national living wage accelerating AI investment? Is that causing people to get AI to do jobs that they would have got people to do before?
Yeah, so that's one hypothesis that has been put forward several times. If you hike the minimum wage to the moon, right, wage costs, employment costs surge, and you get more automation, investment in automation. You can see that with self-checkout counters in supermarkets and so on. So that could definitely be happening. Also, again, if you hike employment costs with the national insurance contribution, there might be more investment in technology, but you also need to consider that actually it's also a squeeze on business at the same time. So the conflict is actually a little bit like the research is a little bit conflicting, because you squeeze businesses on one side, and so they might actually not have the money to do the investment necessary. So I don't think we should push for hiking employment costs in order to accelerate technological change. It should just basically come on its own, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. And so are you noticing, I think AI is of great interest to everyone at the moment. Are you noticing anything in the data around how that's changing the way people work or the way people go to market at all?
Is that towards me or maybe towards Lawrence?
I was asking you, but if Lawrence, feel free to weigh in.
I mean, we're seeing a number of changes with AI across various sectors, right? So it's affecting the labor market already quite substantially, sometimes in very unexpected ways. So one thing we are seeing is that all the data center construction, investment in infrastructure and so on is leading to a surge in demand for blue-collar roles. There's a massive increase in demand for blue-collar roles just because there's so much more investment in infrastructure. So that's one unexpected effect. Within white collar, that's where what people think primarily of when they think of AI, right? I think there's a lot of changes there as well. Again, the high demand for people with AI skills, that's something we are seeing, where it's some routine white collar workers are seeing actually lower demand, and maybe there's a little bit of job displacement already happening for routine white collar jobs. So it is having an impact on the labor market. And then obviously it's also affecting how job seekers are looking for jobs right now. I mean, we're seeing that AI is facilitating applications. We are seeing a massive surge in demand, a surge in applications across for job postings. That is a little bit of a problem for recruiters, and then recruiters adopt AI to fight that off in a way as well. There's various other things. Maybe Lawrence can weigh in, but we're seeing that AI is actually changing both the labor market already for specific jobs, but also job seeker behavior, the way recruiters work. Lots of changes in a very short time span.
Yeah, it's what I would just say is it's really volatile, and opinions around it are really volatile as well. So I mean, personally, I would say that agentic applications are a good thing, right? I have spent a lot of time of my life dealing with candidate concerns, talking to applicants about the pain that they go through. If you're able to support them in such a smart way, then I see absolutely no issue, right? I really don't. However, right, as an example, we block agentic tools, not all, but some, that don't force the candidate to look at the job first. That's a perfect example, right? Like, it's absolutely fine to use an agentic solution to help you apply, and even apply to multiple jobs all at the same time. But you do need to know what those jobs are. And you do need to know if our fear as a job board is that the recruiter gets a call or makes a call to the candidates, you're interested in my job. And they're like, okay, which one was that? Like, on my spreadsheet of 1,000. That is a terrible experience. So we need to be really safeguarding of that, but at the same time, make it easier. Like those solutions are kind of popping up. I think using things like scoring, screening agent, they add natural friction into the process, which is not unwarranted. And hopefully job boards can kind of take a bit more ownership of that entire pipeline, instead of just saying, well, here's 1,000 applications, deal with it, that they are screening themselves a bit earlier, and then making sure that the candidates are unknown, they're vetted, these are proper email addresses, like that. I think the job board needs to then take a bit more ownership of what they then send on. And then when it comes to kind of job creation, again, same principle. There's nothing wrong with using. I mean, I've sat with companies like Michael Page and their leadership saying they're so frustrated because they thought that they hired a load of recruiters, but actually they hired a load of copywriters and didn't know, right? So there's nothing wrong with, again, using agentic to create job listings. But what I would say in this tight market is, you have to be clear about the opportunity, right? This is not a time to stand out. It's important to be relevant, to be credible, to be responsive. So you need to be clear on your role, the salary, the flexibility, progression, like argue why change. And you can get anything out of ChatGPT, but if it's not well thought through, then that candidate will be leaving you in 4 to 6 months, right? So I think it's again, like anything, these tools are there to support, but need to be used with a sense of responsibility.
Absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Can I chuck a 2 cents piece in on that, David? Because I think a lot of that was it was very relevant. It was job related. It was candidate related. I think there was one. And everything we talk about is recruiter related. There was one group of people that were missed in that particular conversation was client side, right? Our CEO Wendy, she sat in a network recently with 100 people in the room and asked for them all to provide a word on how they felt about AI. 4 out of the 5 words provided had a negative or cautious connotation. Right, it's there was one person in the room who went, yes, I was genuinely excited, but everybody else had their reservations. Well, if we use that as a control group, there is a good chance that our clients we are recruiting for are probably feeling the same. So we can take our approach with AI to them, and we not streamline, that's the wrong word. We adapt what we are saying to those clients based on the value that we truly bring by identifying these are our ICP because, or our ideal customer profile, because they value these things we do, and therefore we're worth paying for. At a time where employing people is getting incredibly expensive with rising minimum wage, rising employment costs with everything else. how do I justify the recruiter fee? Well, I justify the recruiter fee because they provide a service that I value. And the way they are screening that 1,000 applications that Totaljob produced is something that I have confidence in. And I don't want my team bogged down with the job of having to do that. Or trying to find a cheaper, quicker, alternative way of doing it with AI and producing what Lawrence talked about, stuffing something into ChatGPT where they can't trust the output. And worse still, I don't accidentally want to become a cropper of new EU AI legislation because I had AI review an applicant and the human being was never included in the decision process. So, I mean, that creates a really exciting opportunity for me, because the way we sell the service to clients now, while everybody is rushing to adopt AI, might actually be, yeah, we use AI, but we use AI to speed up the human beings we had that were great at this job to begin with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, no, thank you for everyone that's stayed with us. We've ran slightly over time, but one thing I'm really keen to ask, because we've got, you know, 3 different perspectives in the room, is really, where do you see the opportunities for recruiters in the market at the moment? I think that would be really interesting to hear from
Who do you want to pick on first?
Yeah, I'm going to pick on Lawrence first, because he's the first on my list here.
Well, I think, I mean, obviously, you know, the easy answer is like, you know, leaning into AI, but using it as Jamie's just said, right? So like, as in using it as a tool to make you more efficient, but not to control your decision making. And I think the other opportunity is to position yourself as, in a world where like we are dramatically shifting to automation, there is a growing market of people who are rejecting that, right? And to consider that, right? Like what does that look like? You know, like we're becoming increasingly aware that we're just talking to chat. So and maybe not being able to distinguish the difference. So like being cognitive of roles that we're recruiting in the market, and, you know, listening to how, you know, what the trends are towards AR replication of that versus human need, and then watching that and seeing where the opportunities sort of grow.
Thank you. Julius, I would actually really be keen, I think the audience would be keen. Do you have any insights on what markets to work? Where's the money at?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think healthcare is probably a good one right now. There's a lot of healthcare jobs that are not really affected by AI, or not that much, and you still need to be in the room. Healthcare employment still has grown quite substantially, even in this like slow growing economy, because we have are facing an aging demographic, aging population. The healthcare needs are going up, and so that is one sector kind of like to watch out for, but there's various others. Strategic workforce planning could be really important as well. I mean, recruiters right now at some companies, there's a crisis, a youth unemployment crisis that this country is facing at the moment, because some companies at the moment are not hiring young people. But at some point in time, the baby boomers will retire, and we'll actually, even with AI, we'll face staffing shortages. And so companies right now could recruit more young people and be more strategic about that, I would say also.
Excellent. Jamie?
So what opportunities does the market create, or which market segments should we be doubling our efforts down on? Which question, David?
I'd be interested in finding out from you. If you were a recruiter, what would you be doing now? Where do you see the biggest opportunity to impact our business?
Yeah, cool. So some really practical opportunities actually, and it's you know, we hear a debate going around about the old school, the right school, whichever school you belong to. Recruitment done efficiently and effectively looks kind of similar, right? So we have our expertise. We know the clients where, or we should know the clients where we provide the most value. Those are our ideal customer profile. Get really granular on who they are, what matters most to them, what you've done that's provided the most value, the way their talent strategies and workforce management is likely to change over the next couple of years, and then build your deployable talent community around that. That needs to be engaged. It needs to be up to date. Your systems need to adapt to be able to capture as much of that information as possible and update all the appropriate fields so they're at your recruiter's fingertips when demand presents itself. But don't just focus on each time a new candidate comes in. Is the tendency has become to when a candidate comes into the system, can they be put forward for the role they applied for? Could they be put forward for something else? We look at a candidate like a placement. Now there's a person behind that, and that person has had a career and they've worked in multiple places. They've interviewed in even more. So take a look at every candidate that comes into you through Totaljobs and go, right, am I capitalizing on all of the commercial opportunities? When I register a new CV, I've got all the backfill leads that I might create, all the previous employers that I might contact, all the references that I might contact, the existing clients that I might market that person out to, if they're a temp that I'm not using this week, the prospective customers going, have you been let down by anybody else? Because I've got this temp available to work if you need somebody. Massive in education, which is one of those market-proof places at the minute. Actually, seen loads of the M&A activity happening here in the UK has been with education recruitment firms. So, I mean, the agencies that are getting the most out of that, they're the ones that are removing the friction for their team members to give them the time to action those opportunities. They've looked at their CRMs, looked at the internal processes and asked, where can we speed this up and create guardrails? I think the last thing, biggest opportunity, is I'd change the narrative a little bit from how do we survive higher employment costs and lower job counts, and start to think, how do we build a business that's more productive, more resilient, better positioned if confidence returns? And that might include some diversification, maybe different markets, like you've intimated in your question, maybe different geographies, but actually, just being, I'm going to get caught out for swearing on a transcript, being shit hot at the things you are shit hot at.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for joining us. And hope you found the webinar insightful. And thank you.
Thank you for having us, David. Really enjoyed
Thanks,
that
everyone.
session.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Julius. Thank you, Lawrence. Bye-bye, everyone.